Next up, another friend of mine. Started off being a consulting couple of hours I spent with him at his ranch, and then later on he made the wise business decision to purchase the Texas Plant and Soil Lab operation, which we're all delighted that he did. Saved a wonderful institution doing soil tests in a completely different way than anybody else in the country does it. And with that, I'll give you Mr. Frank Schultz, and there again, take the soil samples and send the samples in to get tested. I'll let Frank tell you about all the rest of it. Frank?
Thanks, Howard. If I can figure out how this gizmo works. Somehow that makes sense.
There you go. That's it.
We're enjoying now our 75th year in existence. We're still the first soil lab in Texas, predating that land-grant college by 8 years. Let's talk about why you ought to get a soil test. First of all, we probably ought to know what kind of plants we can plant on the soil that we find ourselves with. We need to find out what nutrients may be needed to support those plants, and also find out about problems such as toxicities, heavy metals, or salt. There's a lot more to soil and plant fertility than just the 3 numbers on the fertilizer bag. We've got all of these things, and happily, we'll only be able to barely touch on a few of them. Remember that plants are going to eat whatever they can, and they don't care about what happens to them. If it's available and they can take it up, they'll eat it. If we give them too much, not enough, or the wrong stuff, they're going to act just like we do when we eat the wrong stuff. So let's talk about the carbon dioxide extraction method soil test. It is unusual in that it does not depend upon the soil type as other testing methods do. It is a plant-based test in that it looks at the soil just the same way as your plant roots do. It's also calibrated against actual plant uptake. Of course, it's accurate for any soil in the world. The comprehensive test includes the principal micronutrients. Micronutrients can give you as much, if not more, problems than the major nutrients. In fact, when we hear about a situation where there's disease, the first thing we're going to want to look at is the micronutrient levels. I don't know about where you are, but where I am, this weather and the seasons don't wait around weeks or months for me to get my soil fertility plan together, which is why we try to get your report back to you in 5 working days. Let's talk about what makes up your soil. While you're considering these 3 forms of nutrients, let me talk about carbonic acid for a minute. Plants readily take up water-soluble nutrients. Plant roots generate and exude carbon dioxide, which combines with the water in the soil to form a very weak carbonic acid. It is this carbonic acid that slowly releases nutrients that allows the plant to survive when there's very few of the readily available nutrients. The question is for a particular mineral nutrient, what are the proportions of the 3 different forms? The standard soil test is going to report the water-soluble, the slowly available, and somewhere into the plant unavailable forms. Maybe see the problem when you start seeing situations like this. While you're looking at this, let me tell you, I talk to conventional farmers and I say, do you do soil testing? They'll tell me, yes. We used to do that years ago, send in our soils. The numbers always came back year after year, so we just quit doing it. The reason is that unavailable nutrient compound that's stuck in the soil that never goes anyplace. So we only really want to look at the water-soluble and the slowly plant available. Let's have a look at what makes up one of our reports. Up here is the main report, gives you the big overview and the numbers. Down here are the 3 or 4 pages of specific recommendations and interpretations. You couldn't read any of that, so let's try to zoom in, and hopefully you can read some of this. I wanted to get an interesting test for you, and this one happens to be an avocado grower out of California. This is a real test with the names being changed to protect the guilty. This is an interesting sample. Look at the organic matter and humus fraction levels in these 2 samples. This man, I would say, is obviously an organic grower. We rarely ever see this. Usually we see organic matter levels of less than 1% in most of the samples we see. Over here in the turquoise-looking section is the CO2 extraction elements. The P2O5 is extracted by CO2 only. Over here, we extract with water and with CO2, the readily available and the slowly available. This section right here is what makes the Texas Plant and Soil Lab test unique. Over here, we're giving you what the crop removal or plant removal rates will be for the year. In this case, for 32,000 pounds of avocados, it's going to remove this much of this stuff. Over here is our fertilizer guidelines for the entire year. This is for the whole year. You don't put all this stuff on at once. You break it up over 3 or 4 applications. Micronutrients section. Here, we're telling you what we found in the micronutrients, whether it's high or low. Down here is the recommended. Over here, we have a space for optional test. Here's the optional Solvita soil health and activity test, and he ordered boron as well. We give our guidelines in the generic sulfate forms of the micronutrients. It's in the sulfate forms that the plants take it up. We say caution or equivalent. Their equivalents can be much slower release compounds. We say caution because since the plants readily take it up in the sulfate forms, it'd be very easy to overdo it and do a lot of damage to your plants. You won't know how much of your fertilizer you initially put down actually gets into your plant, and the plant's nutritional needs change continuously. The problem is, how do we dynamically maintain balanced plant nutrition? I'm glad you asked me that question. Starting in 1964, the lab was a pioneer in plant sap testing. Actually, the lab's previous owner's partner started experiments into this in the 50s. So we need to track the ever-changing nutritional status of our plants. While you're reading this, let me tell you what too late means. Too late means that by the time you can actually see visual symptoms of plant nutritional problems, the plant will never achieve its maximum capabilities. The development of it has already been set back, and it will never achieve what it could do by the end of the year. By the way, we don't make a dime off this book. Here's a plant, excuse me, here's a plant, an Astaplant example test. This one happens to be from Idaho on potatoes. What else from Idaho? Here he's well on into logging his plant nutrition, his crop nutrition. We have 5 different tests now from 4 different fields. I want to point out these boxes over here. Notice the arrows right here. This is the detail of the last test taken. You remember that we said plants' nutritional needs change continuously throughout the growing season? In order to accommodate that, these standards, what is desired, can change with almost every test. Depending upon the crop, if it's a very rapidly growing crop, these standards can change a lot from test to test. Because time is always of the essence, The petiole sap test is 24-hour and 48-hour for the leaf test on turnaround time. That's by email after we receive the sample. We do this because plants need nutrients when they need them, just like your kids. Not much difference there. And by the way, the most efficient, rapid way to correct most nutrient deficiencies was foliar feeding, and I bring this up because I see that Howard and Tropical John are going to be discussing this at the last session. Our main goal here is to provide the plants with available, that is to say, plant-available, water-soluble nutrients when it needs them, in the proportion and quantities when it needs them, so we can achieve balanced plant nutrition. Balanced plant nutrition is real important. And I want to point out the big points is much less water usage. University studies have shown as much as 70% less. We can see reduced disease and insect pressures, of course best yields and quality, and we'll use a whole lot less fertilizer simply because we're giving the plant only what it needs when it needs it and not a bunch of extra stuff. A lot of people don't think about water quality. Problem with the water these days is that we're seeing decreasing quality because as the aquifer's levels decrease, it concentrates the impurities in the water and we're sucking more of those up. Most specifically, salt and bicarbonates. These days it's more bicarbonates than salt. In a way, if you're going to have a problem, that's a good thing. Bicarbonate problems are much easier to fix than salt problems. This is not an exaggeration. You apply water that's high in bicarbonates to your soil. Not only does it lock your nutrients up, but the net result of it is it's literally turning your soil to stone. So we need to really pay a lot of attention to our water quality. Here is a commercial grower that I visited. I was there for an event and he called me over and said, "Hey, come over here and tell me what's the matter with my roses." Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. I walk over there and the first thing I'm looking at is all this white stuff on the landscape cloth. And I'm going, "Where do you all get your water?" He says, "Well, from the municipality." I'm going, "Good. That means it's probably not salt. It's probably hardness or bicarbonates." So I'm looking at these, I'm saying, you know, for roses, these are really pretty decorative. I've never seen black spots on the leaves like this. Pretty colorful stuff, huh? So I'm looking out through this mess, and I spot this one plant right here. I'm going, "Tell me the story on that. That one doesn't look too bad." He says, "Oh, yeah, that one." He says, "Well, I was messing around the other day, and I poured some vinegar in a bucket of water and just poured it on that plant, and that's kind of what happens." I'm going, "Dude, there's your problem. You solved the problem yourself. It's your water." And come to find out later on, we reviewed some water mineral analysis, and it was really hard. But we can fix a lot of these water quality and scarcity problems. Scarcity through balanced plant nutrition. Let's talk a minute about biology. Biology is key, and I am sorry to have not be able to spend any time on it here, but it's absolutely crucial to plant functions, and it does a lot of things for soil, plant, and water problems. Biology can fix a lot of problems. I wish we had about a half a day to talk about this. But biology requires food sources. Food sources are mostly based on organic matter, or carbon. As I mentioned, many of today's soils have been largely depleted of organic matter, once again, often less than 1%. And we want to see anywhere from 2 to 3% to 5 or 6%. Good news is we can measure your total aerobic biological activity with a couple of tests we have now taken on. A soil health and activity test to track soil building efforts. If you're adding organic matter to your soil and attempting to build your soil up, this is an extremely useful test. And we have one for compost maturity and stability, where if you're a composter, you can see how your compost is progressing. Okay. How do we get all the cool stuff that Texas Planet and Soil Lab offers? One way, you can go to soilkits.com. One advantage of Soil Kits is that they offer packages, single test packages for the small grower. He has a table out there in the display room. That's what tests look like. Now, these are our generic tests that we send to garden centers. His look a little different, but it's all the same stuff. It includes easy to return. Whole idea behind this was make it convenient. You go on our website, which I'll show you in a minute, you're going to find a lot of cool, interesting, free stuff that you can download. These are all PDFs on general plant nutrition, soil fertility, over here on specific plants and crops. And you can find all of these at asktheplant.com. Thank you very much for your endurance.